Today, many of us live in a man-made world with all its conveniences, opportunities, and demands. And after a while, we forget to notice the beauty and the power and the wonder of God's creation that surrounds us. Our world is filled with competing noises and activities, each one shouting for our attention. But slow down, refocus, and you'll be drawn to a harmony of voices that encircle the globe and gather from the farthest ends of the universe, proclaiming the glory of God, the designer and creator of everything we see and don't see. In Flight and Spike, the second of this three-part video series, you'll discover how God is making himself known in unmistakable ways through creation. So come on, let's join Dr. Job Martin and Dan the Animal Man on a spectacular journey from deep inside the earth to jungles and deserts and to the farthest reaches of space in Creation Proclaims Flight and Spike. Study a stealth bomber. It can fly at Mach speeds while quietly crossing enemy lines without being detected. It's an amazing machine that far exceeds the abilities of any other military airplane in history. But who would claim that the thousands of intricate parts of the stealth bomber perfectly fell into place by accident? No one. It's obvious that such a complex airplane was carefully designed and built by specially trained aeronautic engineers. Now, watch an owl in flight, soaring, swooping, and quietly stalking, and you'll get a glimpse of God's incredible design that not even man has replicated. So how could something so complex have changed from a fish in the water into a reptile crawling on the ground, into a bird flying in the air, and finally into a magnificent owl with all its incredible capabilities? Evolutionists say this process had to take millions of years, yet the most advanced airplane known to man only took about 10 years to be designed and built. For the next few minutes, let's join Dr. Job Martin and Dan the Animal Man as they take a closer look at the owl in our first flying creature feature, Owls, the Silent Raptor.
This owl has got amazing eyesight. It's so amazing that scientists say that their eyes, if they could read a newspaper 100 yards away, the length of a football field. And they've also got something else that God designed them with to do what they do it well, and that's their special vertebrae. Most people think that owls turn their head all the way around. Now, they don't really do that because their head would fall off. I don't suggest you try this at home. Watch this owl's head. It's got a special vertebrae called an atlas vertebrae. This atlas vertebrae will allow them to turn their neck 270 degrees. Now just keep watching. Just keep watching.
When an owl turns its head, now its veins and arteries are getting all twisted up, and it's going to shut off the circulation. So it has these connector blood vessels, and as it twists its head, those vessels shunt the blood. They change the direction of the blood, and it'll switch it over to these other vessels that aren't twisted. And so it has a system of those, so that the further it twists its head, the more changes happen in the way the blood circulates and the way the nerves work. And then it can turn its head this way, same thing. It never pinches off any blood vessel so that it loses its circulation.
Yeah, it's just a special vertebrae that allows it to do that, and it needs to do that, Dr. Martin, because its eyes are stuck right in the socket. Matter of fact, those eyes are so big, I'm going to show you how big. Look at his head, little bitty head. Little bitty head, really big eyes. You see that? Little head, little bitty head, big eyes. Now, look at me, little eyes, big old head. If I made my eyes, Dr. Martin, as big as his and my size of head, I would have to make my eyes as big as this softball.
Well, you look pretty good with that on there.
Sillier than I already do. Look at that, that is huge. Now, do I need eyes that big? No, because if I did, God would have designed me with eyes that big. But I don't need them that big. I could use eyes that big, but don't need them, because God designed us, people, in His own image, according to His likeness, so we have the most complex brain of all, so we can use that complex brain to build what? Binoculars, a telescope,
Glasses.
glasses. Well, I believe that God had a plan. And God, when He designed everything in His infinite wisdom, He designed them to fill a particular niche. This animal fills the niche of night, and it's a predator. It's a predator designed to be very quiet and to see very well, to have powerful hunting equipment, these talons, and it's got a very, very powerful beak that acts as a meat cleaver. This thing is very, very sharp, right? Ah! Just kidding. This thing is really sharp. I'm sorry. This animal is full grown, and it eats lots of different creatures. Rats, mice, chickens, snakes. It'll eat raccoons, opossums, squirrels, rats, bats, and even kitty cats. Yeah, they eat a little bit. They're very opportunistic. If they see an opportunity to eat, they will.
Owls, when they eat, like they'll swallow the whole mouse. But they don't digest the bones and the nails and the teeth and things like that. They have to get rid of that. They have to spit it out. But it's highly acidic because it's been in their stomach. So the stomach has a mechanism for surrounding these bits of debris in a pellet form with like a mucus lining. It's a neutral pH. So when it spits up these parts that it can't digest, doesn't burn its throat, doesn't burn the inside of its mouth with the acid, totally protected, just a very special mechanism that God has designed.
Owls here in America, this is a European and Asian owl called the Eurasian eagle owl, but our owls in North America, they'll even eat skunks
Oh, they eat skunks?
because God didn't design them with a sense of smell.
We many times talk about an owl, and it can see, has those big eyes, and it can see very well. It can see very well, but it can hear even better than it can see. The ears are actually holes to the back and side of the eyes, and they're not symmetrical. And that's so that the owl gets the sound from its prey in a slight different angle and a slight, actually it's a 30 millionth of a second difference in the way that the sound hits one compared to the other. And that way it can adjust its face to aim at where the sound is coming from. Well, those feathers that go around the face, they're a stiffer feather, and they direct the sound to the ear openings. They like magnify it, so that once it goes into the ear hole, it can absolutely target its prey with total precision, to the point that it can even hear prey under 2 feet of snow. It can't see a thing, but it hears it. And so the ears on an owl are just as important, if not more important, than its eyes. As a matter of fact, they did some experiments with owls. They trimmed those feathers around the face, and it couldn't find its prey.
Now, they're effective predators because of these big, powerful talons. Notice I've got this thick leather glove on. That's because this creature, Dr. Martin, has a whopping 500 to 700 pounds per square inch of crushing power.
Well, that's more than a German Shepherd dog.
Absolutely. Very powerful. Now, it also has another really neat design feature that I love to share. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get him to flare out his wings or flap his wings. Now, imagine this, another bird, like even as small as a parakeet to a cockatiel. If you were to see or hear them flap their wings, it sounds like lots of pieces of paper shuffling together. Even a hawk or an eagle, small to large, they make noise. It's friction. Well, those birds are diurnal, or up during the day. This is strictly nocturnal, and it has special fringe along the inside and outside of every primary feather. It's kind of like the fringe on an American flag or a state flag, the gold fringe on the set.
Yes.
There it is right there. You see that little
Almost
fringe?
looks like a little fine-tooth comb.
Yes, absolutely. And that right there is what silences this bird. Now notice, when I flap his wings, it makes no noise. That's the last sound that rat doesn't hear before he squishes its head.
Wow.
Man has not been able to mimic in any way the ability of an owl. Certainly we have stealth aircraft, but the way that owls can fly, how they can pick out their victims, both from using their ears and their eyes, we just have to stand back in amazement. Technology is not sophisticated enough to replicate or duplicate what owls do so effortlessly.
How big do these owls get?
Dr. Martin, this is the largest type of owl in the world. It's a Eurasian eagle owl. But interestingly enough, this particular one isn't the largest because it's a male. His name's Eugene. If his name was Jeannie and a female, she would be about 1/3 of the size bigger.
So what, like maybe up here?
Yep, go ahead. About right here. About the
there?
size of a bald eagle. These guys go from 8 to 12 pounds. That's a huge bird.
How long do they live? That's carrying a lot of weight around for a bird.
Early 20s.
Wow.
But in captivity, because conditions are ideal, food source, husbandry, no stress as far as finding prey, they live up to about 30 years in captivity. Flying takes lots of energy, and I believe that's why God designed the bird with hollow bones, because it's easier for them to fly.
Well, wait, let me say something about hollow bones. When I went to college and took evolution and was an evolutionist, they told us that birds came from reptiles. Well, birds have hollow bones. So what would it take to go from a reptile to a bird, which, by the way, is just the opposite of what it says in the Bible. God says birds on the 5th day, reptiles on the 6th day, but what's evolution say? Reptiles first, then birds. All right, what's a reptile? It's, for the most part, reptiles are dense-boned, they have scales, they have teeth, they're cold-blooded. Well, what is this bird? I mean, this bird is hollow-boned, it has a beak, it has warm blood, and it has feathers. So you'd have to say, okay, if evolution is true then, and the reptiles became birds, is there such a thing as a partially dense-boned, lukewarm-blooded, tooth-beaked, feathery, scaly reptile bird? There's nothing. It's called a missing link, although they've now changed the name to transitional form, because it doesn't sound as missing when they say transitional form. It's still missing. There's nothing in between a reptile and a bird that would prove evolution is true. A bird is a bird, a reptile is a reptile. And God made each thing after his own kind. That's what he tells us. He says there's one flesh of beasts, another of man, another of birds, another of fish, and those flesh, they don't mix up.
All flesh is not the same flesh, but there is one kind of flesh of men, another flesh of beasts, another of fishes, and another of birds.
Indeed, when we look at the rest of the fossil record, we find that horses have always been horses, people have always been people, chimpanzees have always been chimpanzees, and through it all, we find that plants have always been plants. No indication of any macroevolutionary or descent with modification progression that evolution theory demands. That's why we would maintain that some of the best evidence for creation is found locked up in the sedimentary rock units called the fossils.
So Dan, people say that wise old owl. Is an owl wise?
Well, I don't refer to him as wise, Dr. Martin. Most people do. We have that tendency to call it the wise old owl. But what makes it any wiser than the chimpanzee, or the chimpanzee any wiser than it?
Well, that wisdom reminds me of a psalm. And I have the Bible here. It says in Psalm 19, it says, "The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul." And it is, when we know God's word, that's what we need to know to convert the soul. We've been looking at general revelation, the things that God has made. There's also what's called special revelation, and that's the written word. And so he says here, if we know that, it leads to converting the soul. And it says, the testimony of the Lord is short, making wise the simple. So God says, you want to be wise, you have to have your soul converted. And that wisdom that you get is skill in godly living. He says, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. The word's simple there. It's the word for an open door. So if you haven't been converted, according to the Bible, you're like an open door. A philosophy comes in, philosophy goes out. It's just like an open door. And so in order to close that door,
You have to have the wisdom of God.
God tells us to study what He's made and then give Him the glory and give Him the honor. Our God did it. He made it for His glory, and look at it. The way it all works together, unbelievable.
The Bible tells us over and over that creation comes together in a harmony of voices that encircle the globe and gather from the farthest ends of the universe, proclaiming the glory of God, the designer and creator of everything we see and don't see. I will praise Thee, O Lord, with my whole heart. I will show forth all Thy marvelous works.